If you have followed my channel for quite a while, you have probably noticed that I always have riparian or immersed plants in most of my tanks over the years, and I have to admit that I'm quite obsessed with riparian plants. Previously I made videos on how to take care about different types of riparian plants, for example monstera and pothos plants. I also made video about which kinds of house plants basically, or immersed plants, you can put into your aquarium. But today I want to talk about a relatively important topic. What are the benefits of keeping riparian plants in our aquariums? Why do we actually do this? Why bother adding all these plants to your aquarium? Well, I will talk about three main benefits, although there might be more. So the first and probably the most obvious thing is just the visual effect of having this immersed plants on top of your fish tank. Most of us keep fish tanks because we want to imitate a piece of nature in our homes, and we want to have something more than just a bare bottom tank with fish in it, and that's why we create scapes, aquascapes, we add aquatic plants and so on. And for me, adding riparian plants to my tanks, it adds this extra dimension, above water perspective, some sort of an additional picture that I can watch and I can enjoy, and there's so much harmony between this above the water part and underwater part, and they're actually one whole. They're connected because these plants are growing underwater. They're not growing in buckets or pots separately from the fish tank. They're actually growing within the fish tank, so they're part of this fish tank ecosystem, and this is something that creates this absolutely complete jungle-like picture. This is what I enjoy about riparian plants. So the second and certainly the most important benefit of having riparian tanks in your aquarium is actually, and it's probably something that many of you may not be aware about, is that they can act as the most efficient biological filter. That's probably the main reason why I have them in most of my tanks. Yes, in some of the tanks, like for example in this ripariums, this one and the previous one, I keep them also for visual pleasure, for enjoyment, for creating this jungle-like environment in a room. But in most other tanks over the years, I actually kept riparian plants primarily for their filtration benefits. So what do I mean by saying that these immersed riparian plants can act as the most efficient biological filter? Well, we live in an age when we're obsessed with canister filters, with sumps, with all sorts of expensive biological media, but this is a very simple, very cheap, really aesthetically pleasing and really efficient biological filtration. So what do these plants do? Just like the aquatic plants that we have underwater, these plants feed on ammonia. First of all, they're really ammonium hungry. They also, if they don't get enough ammonia, they will feed on nitrates. They will consume lots of nitrates. Some of the plants, for example pothos plants here, philodendron plants, they feed on nitrates, they feed on ammonia as well, but if there's not enough ammonia in your fish tank, they will consume nitrates. And it's a well-established fact, and you can find it all over the net, that adding pothos to your fish tank can help you dealing with nitrates. It's not going to be a cure for your nitrate problem. Of course, the solution is elsewhere, but it's going to help you to control your nitrates. They also help to deal with algae because they consume all the nutrients that algae will generally feed on. And if you have this amount of riparian plants in your aquarium, algae doesn't have any chance to survive because it will be outcompeted by these plants. Why it will be outcompeted by these plants, I will tell you in a moment. You might ask me, why do I say that these plants are more efficient at providing biological filtration, at creating this nitrogen cycle as compared to, for example, aquatic plants? Well, there are a couple of reasons at least. First of all is their size. Most of these plants are far larger in terms of the simple sheer body mass as compared to aquatic plants. For example, this is a monstera plant. This is a regular Monstera deliciosa plant which you can buy in any flower shop wherever you live in the world. You can't see the full size of this plant, but I can tell you it's about this large. When I talk about it, it's above water size, and it also has lots of massive roots under the water, so it's a massive plant. Now you can imagine how many nutrients this plant needs to survive, how much ammonia it consumes. And we all know that Monstera can grow really fast, it can grow really huge, and it's always nutrient hungry. The same with peace lily, philodendron. This is a really huge peace lily, this large. There's a smaller peace lily in here. They are also quite nutrient hungry, and they also need to feed on ammonia, and they need to feed on nitrates. So you can actually stock a fish tank with that many riparian plants quite heavily, because these plants, they will consume everything. All the fish waste, all the bioload that you have in your tank, they will be feeding on that. There will be zero ammonia, and most likely there will be zero nitrates in your fish tank with riparian plants, because they really need lots of nutrients. The other reason is that they actually will grow much faster than your aquatic plants, and they don't require as much as your aquatic plants will require. We all know, those of us who've been trying to grow aquatic plants, we know that they need CO2, they need fertilizers, they need proper light to grow. None of this applies to riparian plants. They don't really need fertilizers. Your fish will provide fertilizers for them. They definitely don't need CO2, because they get all the CO2 from the air. They actually consume all the light and CO2 from the air. When it comes to lighting, well, most of these plants, actually, if you provide them with sufficient daylight or sunlight, that will be more than enough. You know, because most of us grow these plants on our windows or somewhere in our house in a pot, and they grow with just regular daylight. We don't really provide some sort of a special light for our house plants. Well, unless these are some kind of rare or special care plants. So they will survive on a regular daylight. If you will provide them with some additional lighting, which I'm doing over my tanks, they will be more than happy, and they will grow even faster. As you can see, all of these lamps here and over my other tank, they're not really aquarium lamps. Well, some of them are. This is actually just a regular the cheapest possible LED lights, but other lamps are desk lamps and all sort of table lamps from various hardware stores, so they're not really specialist aquarium lights. And this type of lighting is more than sufficient for these plants, and they will grow really fast. So they will grow much faster than your aquatic plants, even if you provide CO2 to your aquatic plants. So very little care, fast growers, fast consumers of ammonium and nitrate. Well, what else you might want? Well, I said previously that you're not very likely to have algae in those fish tanks where you have a lot of thriving riparian plants, and you might be wondering why this is the case, because algae can actually outcompete aquatic plants, because algae grows faster, it consumes all sorts of nutrients, and it deprives nutrients of aquatic plants. Well, the case with riparian plants is different, because they have something that we can call, well, Diane Wolstadt has called it aerial advantage. They consume light, they consume CO2, carbon from the air, unlike algae. Algae only consumes nutrients, light, CO2 that's available in the water column. They don't really grow outside of water. But these plants, they have the stems, their leaves, everything except their roots outside of water, so they will certainly outcompete most types of algae, even the most resilient types of algae. They will simply deprive algae, and maybe your aquatic plants as well, of any sort of nutrients from the water column. So again, I've said it in my previous videos, if you want to grow aquatic plants alongside riparian plants, you will probably need to add some fertilizers for your aquatic plants to be able to compete with riparian plants, because it's exceptionally hard for anything growing underwater to compete with anything that grows above water, because of the aerial advantage that these plants have. So now let's talk about the third advantage of riparian plants, which probably also few of you know about. What they do, along with functioning at the most efficient biological filtration, they also supply extra oxygen to the water. All plants, aquatic, riparian, surface immersed plants, they need to supply their root systems with oxygen. In cases of aquatic plants, they basically pull oxygen from the water column and push them into their roots in the substrate, so this is how they oxygenate their roots. In case of riparian plants, what they do is they pull oxygen from the air and they supply it into the water column to provide oxygen to their roots. This particularly is going to work if you plant your riparian plants with their roots in water. I'm saying with their roots in water because some people also plant them in various planters, pots with a planting mix, and add them in that way to the fish tank. Pretty much like you will plant your pond plants into your pond, you will plant them in substrate and add them to your pond. That way their roots will be in a substrate and they will not really release oxygen into the water column. In this case, and in the case of my fish tank, I only have one potted plant in here, and it's actually not even in water. It's a philodendron white line. The rest of them are actually having their roots in water, so they pull the oxygen from the air and push them into the roots in the water, and that's how they oxygenate water. So they provide extra oxygen to your fish tank, and unless your fish tank is overstocked, it's likely that they will supply more than enough oxygen for your fish without any sort of aeration or air storm and things like that. In addition to these three major benefits of having riparian plants in your tank, I will also add two less important benefits. The first one is that they also can function as mechanical filters. So the roots of these plants underwater, they can trap all sorts of debris, all sorts of muck, all sorts of dirt. And if you, for example, if you have these plants in your tank for a while and then you'll start shaking their roots, you will see that there's lots of debris that comes out of these roots, and that's when you can actually siphon the substrate of your tank, or just siphon whatever comes of this root. So they can basically function as mechanical filtration as well. Not as efficient as possibly a sponge filter and so on, but nevertheless. And possibly the last advantage that I can think of is that they provide excellent hiding places for your fish. So there's lots of fish that enjoy living among the roots of these plants because it's very natural for them. That's where a lot of smaller fish live in the wild. For example, angelfish, discus fish, all sorts of tetras, they live among the roots of these riparian plants near the banks of rivers or near the banks of streams and lakes. That's where they hide, that's where they breed, so they really enjoy living among those roots. Lots of Apistogramma species, for example, they breed among the roots, so they create their hiding places among those roots. So roots also provide very natural environment for your fish, and that's what your fish will definitely enjoy. So just to summarize, the first advantage, which is very personal, they look great, they create this nature type environment, nature style environment. They can turn your living room, bedroom, this is actually in our bedroom, into a piece of wilderness, into a corner of a jungle. That's the first benefit of riparian plants, but that's very personal, of course. Maybe you don't want to have something like that in your room, although I've never met anyone who doesn't want to have it. The second benefit is that they act as absolutely efficient biological filter that will most definitely remove ammonia, nitrates from your water column without many efforts on your part, really. In case of our canister sumps, we really need to maintain them, we need to service them, we need to clean them, we need to buy biological media for them. That's all time consuming and costly. This is not going to cost you as much, and this is not going to take as much efforts on your part in cleaning the water in your tank, so they do really amazing job. The third benefit is oxygenation, so they provide oxygen for your fish and for everything that lives underwater in your fish tank. And I'm not a botanist, so I don't really know, but I assume that they also provide oxygen for us, for humans. So right, I hope this video was useful, and I hope that I have convinced you at least a little bit to add some riparian plants to your tanks and to create something like that in your home. Leave your comments in the comment section. Any questions you might have, leave them there as well, and I will see you soon.